This episode's made possible by Planful. Hello, on today's episode of Planning Aces, we'll be featuring the FP&A insights and commentary of three finance leaders, including CFO Eric Emmons of Nintex, CFO Clemente Cohn of PG Forster, and CFO Todd Patriacca of BVI Medical. This is Jack Sweeney, your co-host, along with performance management guru Brett Knowles, who will serve as our resident thought leader as we seek to highlight the takeaways from our distinguished group of planning aces. We'll begin after this. Ready to plan confidently, close faster, and report more accurately? Here's what sets Planful apart. Imagine purpose-built applications for every department, from FP&A to accounting, marketing to HR, all with built-in financial intelligence. It's easy to implement Planful in just weeks and with minimal IT involvement, so you can rapidly and seamlessly engage everyone across the business on your key financial progress. Best of all, Planful grows with you. Its unparalleled scalability ensures that no matter how fast your business expands, Planful can keep up. See why over 1,500 customers worldwide choose Planful as their flexible, user-friendly, end-to-end financial performance management platform. Go to planful.com/CFO Thought Leader to see how you can reach peak financial performance with Planful. Hi, it's Jack, and I'm here with Brett Knowles. So, Brett, as our summer days wind down and fall stares us straight in the eye, are you headed back, getting back on the road? What's up with you? What's up with your team?
Yeah, that's a good prediction on your part. We find that August in particular is a serious decline in travel. It's just really hard to get quorums around leadership teams. A lot of foundation laying goes on. Most of that's going to happen next week. Like we find the last week of August, first week of September, people begin to go into panic mode because we're coming up to the end of the financial year or calendar year, depending how the organization runs. And people are going, gosh, I have all these objectives that we haven't accomplished yet. We better kick ourselves in gear to get those things done before the end of the year. So been calm for the last couple of weeks. We're expecting the tsunami to begin hitting next week and the week after.
All right. Is travel as big a part of your job today? Poorly stated, but I mean, do you find in your career you're doing less travel, I would imagine, or are you?
Yeah, no, personally, it hasn't changed much, but cumulatively for my company, it has. So last year, I think that, so there's a bit of a blip after COVID. Immediately after we could start traveling again, travel skyrocketed. And I think a lot of companies were trying to get back to whatever that new normal was or the previous normal. But then it's gone through a serious decline since then. So a few years ago, I think across our organization, we would have logged about 10 million miles. Last year, we logged maybe 400,000. So a serious decline, but no change in number of customers, revenue, projects. All the other numbers are the same. So what you can only conclude is more and more business is being done in web meetings. Now, we've done some research into the productivity numbers and sustainability numbers of our projects. No doubt that they work better in person than through web meetings, but cost constraints, the new norm, at the other end, people don't want to go into the office to have these sessions with an external consultant. So I think for a number of reasons, that travel number is going to continue to decline. But I think also the effectiveness of meetings is going to decline, and that becomes a component of the new normal. And it seems like things are beginning to stabilize along the lines I just described.
The effectiveness of meetings, measures of characteristics of effectiveness.
What we look at is a number of things. In the meeting itself, we look at is everyone participating or is there only a few? And we notice in web meetings, they're dominated by a few people. In-person meetings, it's easier to call out those which are kind of lingering in the wings. We're also seeing the preparation for in-person meetings is greater. In other words, people do the pre-reads, they do their homework, and they come to the meeting prepared for the conversation. In web meetings, it seems like everyone's shooting from the hip. I'm going from web meeting to web meeting to web meeting. I'm not doing any prep work. And when I show up, I'm just shooting from the hip. And we've literally scored what we call the viability of recommendations. And we've got an index we put together that basically says, are the recommendations even implementable? In other words, do we have the budget resources to do it? Can the team actually get that work done? And if that work were done, would it really move the needle? And so we see that in-person meetings where people have done the preparation, the viability of recommendations is almost 3 times that of a typical web meeting. So people are doing the prep work, they're coming in, and their response in the meeting isn't the first non-ludicrous thing that comes to mind, but it's a well-researched answer. They've worked with their teams, they've thought about it, and they're coming prepared for a conversation on that topic. Now, there are many, many reasons why that might be the case. It might be the case because they're spending a bunch of money to have us on site, because they're spending a bunch of money to get all the other managers on site. It could be just the energy of the meeting that causes better preparation work. All I can tell you is the outcome is far more viable recommendations, and those recommendations, when they get implemented, actually move the needles. So that's just the observation from a limited experiment, that being the meetings that we participate in.
Well, if you're just joining us, this is not the meetings podcast. This is Planning Aces. And I just believe that some of Brett's thinking around meetings you would find value in, given how many meetings planning professionals, FP&A professionals must participate in to be effective in their jobs and to figure out how to partner with the business, as they like to tell us.
Well, there's no doubt that the 3 gentlemen that we're going to hear from today, the common theme is relationships. They all emphasize the need to build relationships as the most important competency that their teams need to have.
Well, there may come a day when finance leaders come on the podcast and just voluntarily share these wonderful, rich stories around FP&A projects. But until then, here's a not too guarded secret. Finance leaders love to generalize. They don't want to get specific. And there's a lot of reasons for that. They tend to be guarded. Yes, they do. Uh, but one of the ways to get them talking is to talk about their people and how they deploy their people or how they develop their people. So very often I'll ask, can you tell us about the team and, how do you deploy them? And they'll give that some thought. I'm more likely to get a response from them regarding their people. But can be very challenging at times.
Yeah, I bet it is, because I think to a certain extent, at least with the great people you've been able to interview, those behaviors are intuitive. They don't actually understand the magic of what they're doing and what those outcomes are. And so when you begin to ask them about it, it's so native to them that they don't understand that that's actually a unique characteristic.
Well, I imagine some people out there have already guessed that our theme for this particular episode is relationships and people, how an underlying mission or even just a project specific initiative can help teams bond and bring them together. We'll begin with planning ace Eric Emmons, who is today's CFO of Nintex. This is from episode 1017.
Yeah, look, I'm not a person that comes in and brings all my people with me. I think that the sign of any good leader is you come in, you assess, and this may sound terrible, but like I kind of think of net positive, net negative, right? And so like, and even me, right? I'm sure if you ask my CEO right now, he'd say, look, Eric's a net positive, but I wish he was better at some of these things, and he's great in these things. And so, um, look, if I come in and assess you're a net negative, then I will go make a change. I think that's pretty rare. Um, but for me, like I look at two roles, like my head of FP&A and my controller, need to be my right and left hand, and not only from the standpoint of just they need to be talented people. I need to be able to speak to people, right? Like I would tell you, if you're my FP&A lead or my controller lead, you probably not know 95% of what's going on in the company with me, because better decisions are made when there's better decisions are made when there's more than one point of view in the room. And so for me, that's what I look for the most. Yeah, oftentimes you're especially walking into like the size of company Nintex, you're going to find talented people. And certainly I have gone through some turnover, some of it were people wanting to go do something different, some of it was just I wanted more collaboration, people in person more often, and we were a very remote group. And so the opportunity to bring people where I could get in and whiteboard with them and collaborate and solve problems together. So we have gone through some change. But look, for me, you just can't come in and go, hey, I need all these different things. Now, the one thing I will tell, or I want all of my people, you assess the team. Where do we got upside? Where do we got exposure? And then you build from that. I will say there are certain contractors that I use that know me pretty well, and when I come in to assess an organization, but that's usually more on the financial operations side of how information's flowing in data and analytics, and like, are we seeing things clearly, or can we be doing a better job? But I have had a decent amount of changeover in the FP&A side. I think it's been for the positive for everyone. I think the people that moved on have moved on to bigger and better opportunities, and the folks that I brought in, I think are a really good match for me.
Well, we'd like to thank Eric Emmons once again for joining us in August. Brett, what did you make of what Eric shared?
As I listened to him, at every point I was going, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I particularly liked his point that the team, the FP&A team and the controller team both speak to 95% of the people in the organization and know those 95 people. It's not enough that I bump into them in a meeting, but I kind of know their drivers and their thinking. And that is super important, that our FP&A teams become part of, not apart from the process. Like in the olden days, FP&A was almost seen like this evil auditor that was coming in to sort of extract budgets and cut costs and that kind of thing, as opposed to being a collaborator in helping design the right approach for the organization and make sure you have the right people and activities and so on. So I liked his idea about collaboration across the team, but also their knowledge of everyone inside the organization.
He stresses the importance of in-person interaction for problem solving, something we were just touching on.
What I liked as well is, despite the fact that he has this long conversation about relationships and conversations, how important it was to have more than one point of view in the room. And we often get confused with diversity and think that it's diversity of cultural background or skin color or height or gosh, sex, whatever it might be. Whereas what we were really looking for is diverse thinking around the room. Again, if we're in a meeting, we both agree, then one of us doesn't need to be there. So what you want to do is not get anger, but controversy, to get other perspectives and conversation. Sort of the Socratean model of a good debate helps you get a good answer. If we can have that diversity of thought around the room and people feel risk-free to communicate their feelings and their observations, naturally better answers come to the surface. It's not the first non-ludicrous thing that comes to mind, but rather something where we've explored all the options. And yeah, I would say quickly, that's where AI becomes both good and evil. AI is just another voice at the table. And if we don't feel comfortable debating with AI as we do anyone else around the room, we have a problem. AI is going to present a bunch of ideas, no different than each individual presents ideas based on their experience, their perspectives, and so forth. But we need to weigh that against a bunch of other factors. And even more so with AI because it doesn't have that common cultural or business background that it's bringing into the conversation. So he didn't touch on that, but just the extension of that core competency around working with people extends into, this new age of co-pilots.
I like the way he opened by saying that he's not someone who brings his people with him. And of course, I think we all had that same, vision of a senior executive who brings all these lieutenants behind him through the door, which kind of unsettles the opportunities that people might have been hoping for, I would think, or disrupts the flow of that.
On the other hand, bringing your team with you are people that you've previously assessed as a net positive and net negative and decided, that they have the competencies and skills. And so over your careers, you begin to gather these great players like, a kid gathering, marbles or something. And all of us can think of the dream team. If you had the choice of cobbling together a team across all the organizations and experiences we've had, who would be on that team? And you're not really dragging those people along. What you've done is the pre-work to assembling a good team, a team that works together, that brings diversity and so forth. So I understand where you don't want to bring people along just for the sake of bringing them along. On the other hand, if that is the dream team and there are weaknesses in your current team that these people can bolster, I would suggest it's our job to win. We need to play fair, but our job as planners and controllers is to make sure that we bring the best advice possible to the organization. And if it's not the best advice, no one's going to thank you for having not brought along people that could have helped us make better decisions.
Well, our next planning ace is Todd Patriacca, CFO of BVI Medical. We're going to be hearing a little bit here about some of BVI's continuous improvement initiatives and how that is very motivating to Todd's team. Here's Todd Patriacca.
We have a monthly process called Site Week, where we get together. It's basically our operating review. We're looking at the financials, but we're also doing sales reviews, manufacturing reviews, quality, new product development, and the like. So one of the things we've done is over the past years, we've been enhancing all of those standard reports. So now, when our regions are doing their, monthly reviews of their sales performance and product line performance and everything else, those are all now standards, so that we're comparing apples to apples, and that all the that all the information we want to see on a monthly basis is being included. But then we're utilizing a lot of dashboards. So working capital has been a big area of focus for BVI over the past year, and especially in the last 6 months. So making that more transparent. So we've got some standard AP and AR dashboards to track, not only just general DPO and general DSO, but what's our best possible DSO, right? What's the best we could do based on the terms we're, giving our customers through the sales organization, and, using that as are we going in the right direction, or are the sales guys giving away terms? And then looking at what we call the levered terms. This is what, the extra days the customer is taking to pay us, or on the flip side, the extra days we're taking to pay one of our suppliers. So making that, more visible, because, one of the things that, I'm hoping that we'll be able to do over time too, is that, we have not necessarily negotiated the best terms with our suppliers, over the years. We now have a centralized procurement function, and they're working actively on stretching, the terms to get them more in line with where our customers pay us. But there was never really that matching of the two sides of the inflows and the outflows, to make sure that we were getting an appropriate matching between our customers and our suppliers. Things like customer holds. Historically, we didn't have a lot of visibility around, a customer that's not paying us. We'd put them on hold within finance, and the sales organization wouldn't know about it. So they, would be beating up the customer. Why aren't we getting these orders and stuff? And they're like, well, you put us on hold. So now getting that to be more visible, as well as the credit limits. So it's really making all of that information more available to the team. Like I said, we're very decentralized, scattered all over the globe. So we need to get this information out there because we can't always overlap due to time zones. And we want our team to have as much information as possible because, the AR side of things. I mean, sales guys want to generate sales. So you give them that information that they've got a customer that's not paying. They're going to go talk to that customer about getting them to pay because they want that next order and that next commission. So making that more visible to the team has been, a big priority for us. And again, just reinforcing those foundational processes and just, saying that, the way we apply cash, it doesn't need to be different, other than specific nuances in an ERP system. The general process is the same. The same for paying a bill. Frankly, it's no different than me paying a bill at home. So, creating that standard, repeatable work that we can then measure against and create that environment of continuous improvement. And I got to say, with our Center of Excellence, the team there across every single function, super energized and really excited about the improvement opportunities that we have. My AP team has got a list of like 50 things that they're all excited about going and tackling. And we're going to have to do it over time, and we're going to need some automation in there as well. But they see all these opportunities that will ultimately drive a lot of value, reduce the overall cost to the organization for doing the processing, and create a better functioning team that we will then be able to scale as we do additional acquisitions, launch new products, and grow our overall business. So it's fun stuff that just builds on itself, which is really great.
Well, I liked having Todd because he comes from my background, manufacturing. And, a lot of the management practices we have came out of the manufacturing sector. And obviously, that's where America was formed. That's where we formed our accounting principles and so forth. And the idea of what does good planning look like in an organization that's making tangible assets, not software and services. So I liked his conversation. It's interesting that you highlighted lean. Lean is obviously a heavily biased manufacturing framework or used by manufacturing companies that can be applied as other areas that develop manufacturing like quality and risk management into service sectors. But the whole lean process is, again, just taking waste out of every system, whether that waste is waste of time, waste of materials, waste of manpower, and making that process work better. And so what I thought was interesting with him is, in light of that lean approach, still having, monthly, what he calls site meets, where everyone is reviewing what they've done and working on making those reports better and better. That I always think of car dashboards. I think of my dad's car dashboard in the 50s and 60s, where there's a bazillion dials. It was like an oil pressure thing, a voltage thing, all sorts of dials that help you run a very complicated piece of equipment. And I look at what our dashboards now look like, greatly simplified. All those multiple dials are now encapsulated with the check engine light. And we keep it super simple, gas, speed, check engine light, kind of all you need besides Google Maps. And what does that lean process look like in our organizations? We find that reports are getting more and more complicated. We add in more and more data in hopes that we answer all questions before the meeting. And in this case, the lean approach is kind of different. What is the simplest report we can possibly put forward? And so I liked that approach he was taking to lean thinking in the FP&A world.
I intended to ask him a follow-up about the idea of site week. And originally, when he used that phrase, I was like, okay, he's talking about being on site. He wants these people maybe at the corporate headquarters. But then I thought, no, maybe he's looking at their different um, facilities.
They run multiple manufacturing locations. Now they're all small footprint plants, but they're making multiple different products in different environments, and each one of those sites has a certain amount of autonomy about suppliers, about customers, about products, product design, and so on. So it's almost like running a conglomerate where they're all doing something different. I didn't do enough research on BVI to find out where these businesses come from. Did they incubate them or purchase them? Often with these sorts of organizations that are doing medical devices, it's through acquisition. A small startup gets to large enough size, it gets acquired, and then you've got this bevy of diverse companies that may or may not even call on the same customers. They just have the common thread of medical and sterile manufacturing environments, et cetera. And the job of leadership is to help each one of those autonomous business units operate more effectively. So it's easy to understand in something like McDonald's, where we develop the best practice for McDonald's, and we just, as a franchise, make sure every single business unit follows those good practices. In this case, there's a bunch of good practices that each of these micro manufacturing plants should practice. And if we can establish those and roll them across all those business units, I get those efficiencies. So that's that lean approach. What is the best way to vet a supplier? What's the best way to identify customers and target markets, and roll that across these business units that don't have that muscle, and helps them get traction in their market faster, better, cheaper.
Yeah, great. Interesting. It is through acquisition there in the broader discussion, by the way. So you're spot on. That's exactly what he was getting at. And he's come out, just background. He has a center of excellence. They're developing these in Europe and across the globe too. So he's doing it at a larger scale. But it is about recent acquisitions and how they're trying to manage those, integrate them.
Right. And so it's still an economy of scale model. McDonald's gets economy of scale by, the number of stores and the buying power and all that kind of stuff. What they're doing is getting economy of scale around these micro markets, micro plants. So in the medical device industry, it's hard to become ginormous because there's not, they're very special tools that are used for, special situations. And the total market is pretty teeny. It's lucrative, it's high profit, but they're small markets. And there's techniques for managing those businesses. Often, as you grow that business, you don't have those techniques, right? You've managed to capture some small niche somehow or the other. You've managed to scale yourself up to a certain size, but now you're hitting that glass ceiling where to go beyond that, I need better management practices. Simple model, basically that's somewhere between a head count of 50 people and 100 people. At that point, the entrepreneur can no longer span the organization in their ongoing contacts with employees, and I need a way to leverage that management muscle. And that's where that lean process thinking comes in. What is the lean process thinking to managing a business of that size? You can get those disorganized entrepreneurial firms, overlay it with these better management practices, and allow them to take a leap forward. And so, based on what you said, it sounds like BVI is doing that fairly common approach in this narrow sector. I don't think that's repeatable in other sectors. It's just the uniqueness of the medical market, where it's high margin, small volume, very specialized manufacturing requirements. It's just this idiosyncratic market.
Well, our next planning ace tells us how he reached back into his past for a particular individual with a specialized skill set who he wanted to add to the team. This is Clemente Cohn, CFO of PG Forster. You'll hear my voice first posing the question to him. It'll bring some context to what Clemente shares. Here's our planning news.
Does and I'm just curious again, talking about visibility down to the product level. This is the holy grail for a lot of finance leaders, trying to get that visibility down there. Is this something that you were able to bring some of your FP&A talent to help create that visibility, or no? Is that somewhat removed from when you think of product level visibility? And
no, what we did at PG Forster, based on my background and the companies I work for, I mean, I hired one person I used to work for in the past. Talk about leadership, you're building your network, and sometimes you based on your network, you approach people that you worked for in the past. That I know he's very, very strong in data analytics, data architecture. Yeah. And then you could argue, is it a finance job? Is it an IT job? Is it operations job? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Yeah. What matters is that you make it accessible to the business. So, and that's one of the learnings. Sometimes, you as a CFO, a finance leader, you need to think outside finance to show value. And that's what we did. So, then, he did a good job in effectively, practically trying from different databases, different applications to bring information together so that we can look into product level information from a product sales, performance, maintenance, but also development cost point of view, so that you can, again, based on the information, you can make the right decisions about your product portfolio. Where do you want to invest? Where do you want to perhaps shift capital from? So it's not perfect. Also, again, I'm only 1 year in the company, but at least, we have the data to talk about and to make decisions on. The most important responsibility and task for a leader is to develop the relationship with your team. You're talking about here the FP&A team, so that you learn from them and they understand you, so that hopefully today when I go into the room, they know almost the question that I will ask. And what I'm always saying, preempt the question or tell me what you want me. And by the way, then you can reflect this to a business leader. That is more important than telling me, is telling the business. Tell the business leader what you want them to know and to remember. And in the conversations with FP&A is also, again, similar to sales, but a different level, is show appreciation of the difficulty in collecting the information and preparing the information, especially when you don't have the best systems yet in the company, showing the respect for the work that, people are doing and preparing, and learning from each other. Through questions, you learn. If I ask a question they cannot answer, that's okay. That's great, because next time, hopefully the answer will be included in the reporting package. Means, you can evolve to the next level as an organization.
Well, I think it's ironic that you're trying to ask him how to get visibility at the product level. Ironic because, unlike Todd, where in the medical devices area, it takes a lot of work to develop a product and get regulatory approval and so on. And once you've got that, it's locked in. It's protected by regulatory compliance, but it's also locked in from doing too much innovation and changing. Whereas, and that's to a certain extent Clement's background, but certainly within PG Forster, it's a different story where you can create a new product every day. And, he talks about their job being collecting and putting information together. And in that world, it's about bringing different perspectives in. So am I seeing a customer perspective, an employee perspective, an investor perspective? Those are all different views of the same organization that somehow I need to consolidate and find that path down the middle. And so it's a really tough product to nail down because those stakeholders are diverse, very different from organization to organization. So probably not a really data-rich experience for you trying to get that visibility, but it takes unique skills. It takes unique skills to track those different products as they morph literally month to month going forward. The key takeaway for me from him was his idea of getting to preempt the question. He wants his team to figure out what questions he might ask and actually preempt that question by answering it before he gets a chance to ask it.
And when that happens, he knows that he's on the right path, I suppose. Well, can't help but try to narrow the lens back on relationships and this idea that how relationships are formed is changing. It has a lot to do with, I think, coming out of COVID, virtual environment. We were talking earlier about meetings, effective meetings, how to involve people. Um, a big part of our conversation today is really about relationships. And I would attribute to, in part, that how people form relationships is changing.
Right. I think you've got it there. I think that the technical skills that we think of with FP&A people are necessary but not sufficient. That the competency level in the broader organization is ever increasing. Like many of our internal FP&A customers know more about planning than our FP&A teams do, and more about finances, and they've taken the accounting courses and so forth. So a much more skilled constituency that we're working with, which means they're more skillful in doing many of the tasks that we used to do in FP&A. They can do it themselves. So that means the FP&A responsibilities now are shifting, where I'm doing less technical stuff and more strategic stuff. I also need to have those relationships to tease out of the team what decisions they've made, what directions they've taken. So the FP&A team need to be able to get that rapport with their internal customers in order to tease out those answers. So that's part one of my answer. Part two, I think you also touched on, and that is I need a different skill set to get a relationship in a virtual meeting than in person. And much, much more honed relationship skills, and also understand how to utilize that virtual meeting environment to maximize what we learn in any one meeting. My third part would be that we're seeing more and more people's time are getting consumed in meetings. And meetings, some could argue that aren't very productive, but they're certainly more plentiful. And they're probably more plentiful back to this I'm working remotely, need to connect to stay aligned. But now people are overwhelmed with meetings. And so the next meeting, FP&A, is just another meeting in that ongoing carousel of meetings. I haven't prepared for it, haven't thought about it, and so forth. I need better skills to facilitate that meeting and draw out of the participants what we need at FP&A to get our job done. So, three driving points on where that new relationship competency is within the FP&A team.
Is it fair to say that within organizations, FP&A professionals are the ones who really shoulder the burden of building relationships across the company? HR people as well, I suppose, and others, but
I'd say every single function has that challenge, but they've got a different agenda of what they need to accomplish and are perceived in a different way. So when FP&A people show up, maybe there's this lingering feeling that these are just people trying to constrain budgets and limit our autonomy. When HR shows up, they've got to contend with that same cross-functional nature of work, but they might be perceived as getting in the way of managing people and doing what needs to get done. Benefit is I get better compensation rewards, but HR has a dog in the fight. When IT shows up, also another cross-functional back office support group, same thing. They're trying to manage their costs. We're not getting the service support that we want. We're not getting the software we want. So each of those groups need to manage what's happening inside the meetings, no different than FP&A, but their additional agenda is either going to have them welcomed in the team or seen as a destructive force. Now, I've been describing back office teams. Same happens with front facing teams. So when sales is meeting with operations, I have the same problems. When sales is meeting with marketing, I have the same problems, and so forth. So it's this ongoing pressure in any meeting to get the relationship in place, given the opportunities and anchors involved.
Now, there are clearly other common themes that these three planning aces and their comments and thoughts have in common and shared.
All of them have focused on that need for collaboration, for diversity of thought, for helping the team the organization come up with better decisions and be more effective at doing it, whether that's through techniques like lean management, making sure that I'm assessing for the net positives and net negatives, or teaching my people to think better so they can preempt my questions. They're all dancing around that same issue of how do I make my team strategic advisors to the organization.
Nice. Well, we'll leave it there, Brett. Thank you once more, Brett Knowles, for joining us.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to our next conversation and the next group of planning aces that you're able to put in front of us. Always great conversations.
Thanks again. And once more, to our listeners, thank you, as always, for listening.